Hey everyone, it's actually Jeb Bush, and welcome back to part two of post trade deadline NBA SoRare Future Cheat Codes, a title that just absolutely rolls off the tongue. Real quick, if you could just make sure to hit that like button and also make sure you're subscribed to the channel, it's something that's really easy for you that really helps me out a lot. And also, if you really enjoy the NBA or DFS and you don't have an NBA SoRare account, you can create it using the affiliate link right here, which gives you 20 free common cards to use for their free common contests. Additionally, if you want to try to win some better prizes by participating in the higher tier contests, if you buy 5 limited or higher tier cards on the new auction marketplace, you will get a limited card airdrop to you for free, but that's only if you create the account using the link below in the description. So with that being said, let's not waste any more time and let's continue where we left off by taking a look at the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, OKC is in an interesting place because while they would probably love to tank and get in the draft lottery, they have a lot of talent on their team and as a result are sitting kind of in the middle right now. They're currently sitting at 10th in the Western Conference, but it wouldn't be the hardest in the world for them to drop all the way down to 13th and get a little bit better of a percentage in the draft lottery. Now, I say all this because I think OKC is a very interesting team to watch, and there are players that are potentially worth picking up. However, based on how the rest of the season goes, some of those players might start riding the bench a little bit more because OKC has decided to actively tank, or these players might play a little bit more because they are actively trying to get into the playoffs. So I think that's worth noting, especially since the last two teams we talk about were big sellers during the trade deadline, and OKC kind of just sat there and chilled with what they had. So there are 3 players on OKC that I want to talk about today. The first one is Jalen Williams, and I'm just going to mention him briefly. Jalen Williams is in the starting lineup. He is a player that has shown some like incredible abilities and someone that might be very special. And that's why I'm mentioning him real quick. He does average like over 30 minutes per game and has a higher cap. So this is not a player that necessarily will see a massive spike in verticality, but he is a player that has that potential to really put up a crazy ceiling game. And that might cause a bit of a spike in price and demand. So I'm not rushing to buy Jalen Williams. And if I did go and buy him, it wouldn't be to try and flip him for a profit. It would be more specifically to fit him in lineups, knowing that moving forward, he would probably be a very good play with a high ceiling for years to come. However, we're trying to find players that can really moonshot based on injury news and stuff like that. So that's why we're not going to take a really deep dive into Jalen Williams today. However, one of those players that I think has a lot of potential is JRE right here. Now, if we look at JRE, he's sitting at about $5 right now. He's averaging 23 minutes per game and he has a cap of 22. But the reason why I think JRE is interesting is because he is coming back after being injured for quite a while. And I feel like people just are sleeping on him a little. They just really maybe even aren't aware that he's back, partly because he hasn't really done anything of interest since coming back in terms of SoRare scores. But if we take a look at his price graph, especially at the beginning of the season, we can see some very serious verticality here, which shows kind of the potential and the excitement around JRE. Now, since then, like I said, he was injured. We can kind of see he starts to dip, and then we can see no blue dots, which means he was injured and they weren't even minting his cards for auction. And he's just started back up recently. You can see that I bought one here, which is kind of close to his all-time low. You could have obviously gotten him back in November for like $2-3. I probably paid like 4 or 5 for him right now, but I still think that's a pretty good price just because I think as he kind of plays back and gets healthy and gets his legs underneath him, he'll have a higher potential to put up a score that is noticeable. And I just think once people kind of notice that he's back to full strength, we might see his price go up a pretty decent amount. Once again, I'm not expecting these type of prices, but I think him going to like $10 to $12 is actually pretty reasonable. If we take a look at his scores, we can see, he was putting up some low 30s. Here's a couple high 30s. So nothing like absolutely off the charts, but he is a player that is going for like about $5, a little below that. I think he's kind of an interesting dart throw with OKC and the way their team works and the way their rotations work. And he's a player that gets to start games. I think there's a lot of upside here for the rest of the season moving forward. And like I said, I just feel like people are kind of sleeping a little bit on his potential because he hasn't played in so long and his games back have not been notable whatsoever. The other player on OKC I really wanted to talk about was Jalen Williams. Now, Jalen Williams is going for $7. He's averaging about 18 minutes per game, and he has a cap of 17. And Jalen Williams is a player that I think has a lot of potential to get a massive boost based on injury or people being benched. As we can see, if we look at his chart, he has a lot of verticality since the end of December. You can see I sold one of these here, but he had another one soon after that. And he's had just quite a few. Like we were seeing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like a lot here. His price is a little bit all over the place, and I do think $7 is maybe a little bit much. I would feel a lot more comfortable buying him in like the $5 range, but he's a player that I think can get a lot of extra minutes, like I said, based on someone getting injured or someone resting, and OKC is in a interesting position. So I really like Jalen Williams as a dart throw. If we take a look at his scores, we can just see, he has some ceiling potential. He recently dropped a 40, a 41, and he did that in 30 minutes. He's got some 30s here as well, but he has all these games here that'll kind of keep his cap relatively low. So, like I said, I'm not rushing out to buy one, but if you can snipe one for $4 or $5, I think he's a very, very interesting dart throw with the cap he has. I think he could fit into quite a few different lineups pretty well. And if we're going to look even more big picture here, and you could say this about all the OKC players, but it right now looks like there's a pretty decent chance that OKC is in the play-in game. And if OKC is in the play-in, I would imagine we have SoRare contests specifically for that, since those will be the only games going on. So a Jalen Williams card might really, really pop based on a perfect storm of a playing game and someone sitting or him getting more minutes because it's a more important game. Obviously, you should take all that with a grain of salt. There's a lot of games between now and then. But yeah, ultimately, I just kind of like Jalen Williams as a dart throw. And I feel like at some point I'm going to pick another one up. All right, so the next team we're going to look at is the Los Angeles Lakers. This was the last So Rare Steals video we did before the trade deadline super stream. We covered them pretty extensively, both in that video and that live stream. So I don't think there's a lot to talk about here, even though the Lakers made a ton of moves during the trade deadline. However, there is one player that I think is definitely worth talking about that they picked up during the trade deadline, and that is Jared Vanderbilt. Now, if we take a look at Jared Vanderbilt, we can see that he has a price of $10. He has a cap of 23, and he has 20 minutes per game with somewhat decent stats, nothing too significant here. And if we look at his price chart, we don't see anything super significant here either. Not a lot of verticality, nothing super special. So you may ask, why do I care about Jared Vanderbilt when he doesn't really fit the formula that we're typically looking for? And the reason for me is I think Jared Vanderbilt has a significant role to play on the Lakers. And if Anthony Davis gets hurt, he is like the big man. He is a defensive minded player with a lot of energy. And if we take a look at his scores, he just started on the Lakers. So it's a little hard with this sample size to determine how many minutes he's going to end up getting. Because you can see here, his first game, he had 16 minutes. His next game, he had 22. And then the last game he played, he had 27 minutes, which ironically is his worst score out of the three. But I think Jared Vanderbilt more than likely will be in the starting lineup for the Lakers. He started this last game, as we can see. He's a defensive player, which the Lakers need desperately, and he's a high energy guy who has a pretty decent ceiling in terms of scoring on both sides of the court. If we look at his scores historically when he was with the Timberwolves, we kind of really see these two ceiling games pop out, which is a good indicator of, he has that potential. And, the Lakers have LeBron, who takes off a lot of games because he's old, and Anthony Davis, who is a glass cannon who hurts himself every time he sneezes. That is an ideal situation for a player like Jared Vanderbilt, who has not pumped after being traded whatsoever, when a lot of players did, and someone that has, I think a real potential to pump if certain players are sitting or certain players get injured. I think he is just in an ideal situation to have a high ceiling in an optimal lineup as a cheat code. I think if we look here, we haven't really found out where his ceiling is in terms of price because we haven't seen a lot of verticality here. As a result, I think it's just really prime for a good spike. And if you buy low and are able to catch that spike, I think there's a pretty impressive profit margin there for you. And the last thing that I want to talk about in part 2 is the Portland Trailblazers. Now, the Portland Trailblazers did a couple little moves here and there during the trade deadline, but nothing super big that really shook the team up. So we're not going to go super in depth into any of these guys for that very reason. I don't think anyone's roles drastically changed. However, I think it's worth pointing out that Drew Eubanks, I think, is a really good pickup, especially right now that he's all the way back down to $4. If we go ahead and take a look at his price graph, we can see that, he's had quite a bit of verticality multiple times. You can see I took advantage of that before, and I currently have a Drew Eubanks still. I do have a common also, but I got a limited. But as we can see, his price has dipped down significantly, probably the lowest it's been in quite a while. Drew Eubanks is kind of the backup to Nurkic. The reason why Drew Eubanks is worth picking up is solely because Nurkic gets hurt a lot, and Drew Eubanks, when he's coming off the bench, his cap's going to go down. All of his stats are going to go down. But when he's starting, because Nurkic is hurt, like Nurkic tends to be hurt, we can see him put up some pretty significant numbers. I mean, we see a 44 here, a 37, a high 30. And, his cap can get all the way down to like 10 to 12, I think is what it was before that like first big spike. Drew Eubanks is a pretty good player. And if he's getting that jump from bench to starter because of an injury, he is basically an automatic cheat code. As long as his cap has had time to go back down once Nurkic comes back. So I really like Drew Eubanks, and sitting at $4, I think that's a pretty good deal. I think he might be worth watching because I don't think there's any rush to go and pick him up. But yeah, I like Drew Eubanks. It's as simple as that. I think he has moments for the rest of the season, multiple windows where he will be a cheat code for sure. The other player on the Portland Trailblazers that I want to talk about is Jabari Walker. Now, as we can see by the price graph here, Jabari Walker is a player that is prime to be a cheat code based on, players sitting or players being injured. We can see some pretty crazy verticality where he's peaked at like $12. Here he's peaked at 10, or like, probably a more reasonable number in the bunch here is like 8. Here's another like 7, 8. And here's like a 6. And as you can see here, I've bought him multiple times. I sold him on one pump here, but I bought him here for 227, and I bought him here again for 227. And his price is going down pretty aggressively again. It's almost back down to that price again of like about $2, which I think is kind of crazy that people are in such a rush to sell him off when it's clear, given the right circumstance, he is a bit of a cheat code. He can put up a pretty solid number. And with a cap of 5, you want to talk about like a high upside lineup. It's a lineup with a Jabari Parker only taking up 5 of your cap. in a champion lineup so you can squeeze in two like high cap, high ceiling players. I really like Jabari Walker as a player as well as a SoRare play. But I think by this graph, it's pretty evident that there will be windows down the road where he will have some spikes and you can take some profits, or you can make a pretty sick lineup with him. Now, if we do take his scores real quick, we'll see that, he hasn't had any monster games, which you would assume if he has a cap of 5, but he has put up an 18 recently, a couple 13s, a 19 here, 16. And that's still, that's like a 3x from his cap. That's more than enough, and that's what you're looking for a player with that cap. So ultimately, I think Jabari Walker is a player that could be a cheat code many times for the rest of the season, and potentially even into the playoffs, where you have a limited pool of players, so those low cap players become even more valuable. So yeah, I think I'm going to end part 2 here. I think we're going to have one more part 3 video where we take a look at the remaining 3 teams and some potential cheat codes there. So go ahead and make sure to check the description for that, as I will be putting it there. Please make sure to hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I really appreciate it. And if you don't have an NBA SoRare account, make sure to create it using the link in the description below. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video, and I hope to see you in part 3. Please clap.